On Sunday mornings, the apartment would breathe differently, like it had been holding its lungs against my weekday pacing, and finally remembered how to soften. The kettle clicked on. The cat, really my ex-wife's cat, now mine, the color of ashen milk, coiled on the radiator and lifted one paw in a slow ballet. I learned to move unhurried through the quiet, to lay the blue mug near the French press, to open the drawer I'd cleared in the dresser and pick a pear with deliberation. Some days I chose matte, 20 denier, the faintest whisper of a finish. Other days I chose glossy black, the kind that made the morning light behave like water across my shins. Always I sat on the edge of the bed and rolled them up carefully, toes first, heel aligned, smoothing my palms over my calves with that small shiver of electricity that felt like remembering my own name. I hadn't done any of this before the divorce. Before, my life was symmetrical with obligations. The calendar told me where to be, who to be. It had taken the messy end of a marriage for me to listen to the little tug I'd ignored forever, the tug toward softness, toward the everyday beauty of fabric that held me with a gentle, even pressure. It was not a performance, not a costume. It was a choice to feel my skin against something both fragile and strong. I bought oversized sweaters from the thrift store, worn-in knits that draped like a hug, and I wore shorts with the sweater when I felt brave, or loose chinos when I didn't. Over time, bravery and not bravery stopped feeling like opposite doors, and more like the same hallway with different light. The first Sunday that mattered, a sliver of glass on the sidewalk caught my foot right before I reached the old sycamore that split our block into shade and flare. I heard the snag before I saw it, a sound like a zipper catching breath, a little gasp at my calf. A ladder bloomed down the back of my left leg in a precise, merciless zigzag. I stood there, coffee balanced in one hand, the paper bag with a cinnamon roll in the other, suddenly 10 years old and embarrassed, except no one was watching, and I wasn't 10, and the embarrassment was less about the rip and more about the fact that I wore something rippable out in the world, like my body might be a truth I didn't apologize for. Except someone was watching. It turned out Maya, from 2 houses down, leaning on her porch railing with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders and her dark hair caught up in a knot that looked both practical and glamorous. I'd seen her during evening walks with a kid, I guessed 8 or 9, who chorused facts about constellations into the dusk. I knew she was divorced, like me, because the neighborhood traded personal history the way old bricks traded ivy. I knew she wore gold hoops and laughed with her whole mouth. We'd said hi a dozen times, nothing more. "Hey," she called gently, like you would to a bird startled by its own shadow. "Bad ladder?" I looked down, then back up at her, hesitant. The worst, like it offended a god. She smiled, and I felt something unclench at the hinge of my sternum. "Come here," she said. "I keep a sewing kit by the door for kid emergencies, and adults who live interestingly." On the porch, she pulled aside the blanket and let me sit on the top step. The morning smelled like damp wood and someone's toast 2 houses over. She had the kind of careful hands that knew what they were doing. She anchored the run with clear nail polish from a little emergency bottle, then threaded a needle with a practiced flick. Up close, her eyes were a warm brown with a lighter ring near the pupil, like sunlight inside a walnut. There were faint laugh lines at the corners. On her left ring finger was a thin tan band where a ring had lived and left. Mine had the same sign. She worked in quiet concentration, tongue against her back molar in a small habitual press, the way some people think with their whole face. The nylon shivered under her touch. My skin did too. "You do this a lot?" I asked, because silence felt powerful, but my heart was loud, and I wanted to be in the same volume with her. "I did a stint in wardrobe for a community theater before my son was born," she said. "You learned to triage runs like an ER doctor. You?" She tilted her head, not asking me to explain myself so much as opening a window I could lean into if I chose. "You like the way they feel? Or the way they look? Or both?" I took a breath. My ex had never asked. I'd never offered. "Both," I said. "Mostly, they make the morning feel tuned, like a guitar string finally at the right note. I don't have language that's bigger than that yet. But it's not a secret I want to keep from myself." "Good," she said simply, and the way the word landed made my lungs do another of those relief hinges. I like men who know how they want to feel, and who keep nail polish by the door. I laughed, then looked at the little bottle balanced by her knee. Is that yours? My son's, actually, she said. He paints different fingers different colors because it makes him look like a coral reef. His words, not mine. She tied off the tiny stitch, patted my calf through the sheen, and sat back. Okay, it's not invisibility, but it'll get you home. Or on your walk. I was headed toward the river, I said. The light does that mirror thing. Go, she said, and bring the mug back next time you pass. Or don't. I like a mystery. The second Sunday, I returned the mug, scrubbed clean, and a bouquet of supermarket tulips I knew would die in 3 days. But that would, for those days, insist that our particular corner of the world could be better than fine. She opened the door in a faded concert tee and leggings, cardigan slipping off one shoulder. The kid, Benji, peered from behind her and said, "Are those tights?" with the straightforward fascination of someone who had not yet learned embarrassment. "Pantyhose," I answered. "Tights are usually thicker, less sheer. These are." "Shinier," he said, delighted by the small scientific difference. "Like fish." We became the kind of neighbors who borrowed sugar and returned it in cookies. I fixed the hinge on her bathroom cabinet with a screwdriver that had belonged to my father. She sent me home with leftover lasagna that tasted like someone had finally taught me the difference between salt and love. I learned that she worked part-time at the library's reference desk and part-time at a boutique that sold clothes not designed to punish the bodies that wore them. I learned that I could talk about denier and weave and the kind of waistband that didn't dig, and she would nod not like someone indulging me, but like someone who had her own texture preferences and wanted to swap notes. Some evenings, we walked the block while Benji scootered ahead and circled back with facts about Jupiter's moons. She wore opaque tights with a sweater dress and boots, and I wore my sheer ones under shorts or trousers, depending on the temperature. And the houses gave us their small domestic flickers. Someone arguing softly about a rug, someone dancing alone with a wooden spoon microphone, someone's laughter spooling down the steps like a ribbon let loose in wind. One afternoon in late October, the air bronze and crisp, we hauled her storm windows from the basement and propped them against the porch rail. She hammered. I held. Our wrists brushed. Something threaded through me with the same surety as her needle had that first morning. When a particularly stubborn screw resisted, she bit her lip and put her weight into it and grinned at me after like she'd made a friend of gravity. "Do you ever wear skirts?" she asked finally. No show and tell demand in it. Just curious, like asking if I put cinnamon in my coffee or preferred cardamom. "Sometimes," I said. The truth was, I wore them in the apartment, where the cat's opinion felt like a mercy. I didn't wear them outside. Not yet. I haven't found the first-time place, I admitted. It's not the grocery store for me. I want, I don't know, an occasion where the point isn't that I made an occasion. Maya nodded, eyes on the screw as it gave and turned. "What about my stoop?" she said. "Not a stage, just a place. We can try a few outfits and see which one makes the air feel right." The next Sunday, I brought over a canvas tote packed with a hotel robe, a navy skater skirt, a black pleated one, my favorite sweater, and 3 pairs of pantyhose, sheer nude, sheer black, and a graphite that gleamed like the inside of a river stone. Maya had cleared a path to the full-length mirror in her hallway and draped a scarf over the top so it felt like a gentle creature rather than a sentinel. "Benji's at his dad's," she said unnecessarily, but the quiet made a place for itself anyway. She made tea and put music on low, cello covers of pop songs, somehow both corny and perfect. I changed in the bathroom, fingers more clumsy than usual from the stakes I decided existed, and when I stepped onto the stoop in the navy skirt and the graphite pair, she put her hands over her heart with a little theatrical gasp. "Okay," she said, "I know you're the one wearing them, but those belong in a museum. Turn." I turned, feeling the air on my knees and the way the nylon hugged my thighs like a suggestion rather than a rule. "Now sit," she said softly, and I did, tucking my legs to one side in a posture I'd unconsciously studied my whole life and never allowed myself to inhabit. She adjusted a hem, smoothed a wrinkle, and the fabric made that whispery sound nylon makes when it talks to itself. "How does it feel?" she asked. and the seriousness of it almost undid me. "Like I don't have to brace," I said. "Good," she murmured. "Let the neighborhood take you in at this pace." A car passed. A woman from 3 houses down waved. The sycamore shed a leaf the size of my face, and it landed at my ankle like an invitation and a benediction. The moment did not shatter, it deepened. After that, Sundays had a slump and leaned toward Maya's porch. I still walked alone first, the river doing its mirror stunt. The world shined thinner by November. One morning, a jogger, a man in his 60s with calves that had met every hill in the county, caught up to me and said, "Breath even. I wear support hose for races. Best thing for recovery. My wife steals them for plane rides." He gave me a thumbs up and veered toward the park. Every time I expected the worst, I got something else. Curiosity, indifference, the complicated quiet of a neighbor who glanced, smiled, and returned to her tax prep. Maya began to attract other porch denizens on those Sundays, like a gentle magnet to which people stuck for a while before drifting on. There was Ruth from the corner, who brought a Tupperware of honey cake and told me matter-of-factly about the stockings she wore to work in the 70s, because the office temperature never rose above meat locker, and the male partners sat in shirt sleeves anyway. There was a newly married couple who asked where to find hosiery in deeper browns without orange undertones. Maya wrote down the boutique's name and circled the days she worked. There was a teenager whose mother folded her arms tight across her chest and glared, and the girl who kept her gaze not on me but on Maya's hands as if they were a lighthouse working through fog. I fell a little in love with the ritual of it, in an old, careful way. I also fell in love with Maya. It happened like dusk. You don't notice the exact minute the day isn't day anymore. You just look up and your eyes are adjusting to a change that already occurred. It showed itself in tiny episodes I wanted to pin like butterflies and let fly anyway. The way she checked my face before she touched my arm. The way she said "our block" with a proprietary tenderness that made me step better on its sidewalks. The way she never teased when I bought the same brand in 3 different shades, because the shade names, cedar, gravel, smoke, sounded like places I could live. One evening, as January rehearsed itself in the sky, cold rehearsing the inside of my sinuses, Maya texted, "You up? Come by if you want." Benji is with his dad until Tuesday. I brought ginger tea and, on a private dare, patterned pantyhose, tiny diamond nets, subtle, the kind that looked like graphite crosshatching until you were close. She had moved the couch so it faced the window. Outside, snow came down like the sky had finally remembered softness, too. "You look like a mystery solved," she said, because she always said something that felt like a fingerprint. She patted the cushion beside her and tucked her feet under a blanket shared across both our laps. We talked about work, about the particular joy of recommending the right book to the right reader at the right time, about my ex, whose name neither of us said, about the way January insisted on its own bones. I told her I'd met with a therapist and said aloud for the first time that some days I wanted my clothes to tell a different story about me than the one they used to. That I didn't have to choose a single noun yet. That I could be a man and still feel closest to myself in certain textures, shapes, colors. That the word crossdress held a little paper cut of shame because of what the world had taught me. And I was ready to own it differently. To put it next to the coffee maker where the morning could reach it. "Let's use a better word then," Maya said. "Dress right. As in, you dress right for how you feel." She smiled. "And if you want nouns later, we'll go vintage shopping for them." We kissed once that night, and it wasn't a test or a run for our lives. It was 2 adults with winter under their skin, pressing their mouths together in a way that felt like acknowledgement, like turning a page to see what's next, like agreeing to an itinerary we chose together. Her hand cupped the back of my neck. Mine rested at her waist, feeling the ridge where the blanket ended and the warmth began. When we parted, we didn't apologize for wanting to. We didn't rush. She asked if I wanted to spend the night, and I said not yet, not because I didn't want to, but because my body had made peace with slow, and I was trying to honor it. We became us. Carefully, easily. Her calendar and mine overlapped where it made sense, and left room where it didn't. We made breakfast for 3 on the Thursdays when the custody plan was gracious. We discovered that Benji liked to wear patterned knee socks and a clip-on tie with robots on it, and that his school's dress code didn't know what to do with Joy when it wasn't wearing a polo shirt. We went to the parent-teacher conference and laughed with the teacher who said, as long as he understands long division, his socks can look like a comic strip. At the boutique, Maya began to collect small treasures at the register for me. Demi-sheer pairs with flat seams that didn't dig, control tops that felt less like an audit and more like a hug. I came by on my lunch break and let her hold a pair across my forearm to check the transparency. A gesture that should have been clinical but felt intimate in a way that included the world. Once, the shop manager, a practical woman in her 50s with a severe bob and a secret stash of gummy bears, caught the glance and the way Maya's hand lingered. She said, "We have a couple's discount certain weekends," with a wink and no other commentary. I left with a pair the color of wet sand and the sensation of being invited. The conflict when it arrived was shabby, almost boring, which I later understood as a blessing. It wasn't violence. It wasn't a public scene. It was a typed note taped to my apartment's shared laundry room wall that read, "Please keep women's garments out of the dryer filter. We are a family building." Someone had put feminine stick figure icons in the margins like a little gate around a garden they didn't plant. I took the note down and brought it to Maya. She read it once, twice, the muscle in her jaw working. "We could ignore it," she said, "but I'm tired of ignoring things that make us smaller." We wrote a response together, precise and kind, not because we owed kindness to rudeness, but because it felt like an act of self-definition to do so. We said, "Clothes aren't gendered, people are." We said, "We are a family building because families look many ways, including a single mom and a kid who loves science and a man who walks on Sunday mornings and comes home steadier." We said, "Cleaning the dryer filter is a shared responsibility. I'll keep doing my part." We signed our apartment numbers and taped it up. The next day, it was gone, and in its place, someone had drawn a stick figure with shinier legs than the others. It was petty, sure, but the shine made me laugh out loud. In March, the neighborhood organized a block cleanup, the kind of spring ritual that pretends the world can be ordered into bags and stacks. Maya proposed a post-cleanup potluck on her lawn. I volunteered tables and a speaker. Ruth made honey cake again. The jogger brought deviled eggs. The teenager came with her mom, who softened by half in the new light. There was a moment when I stood at the edge of the lawn, plate in hand, and saw the skirt in my closet the way you see a tide, as something that exists whether you step into it or not. I went to my apartment, changed into the navy skater skirt and the graphite pair, and walked back before my courage could translate itself into a meeting request. Maya saw me first. She didn't make a speech, she didn't clap, she simply looked at me the way people look at what they have been waiting for without knowing it. She put 2 fingers to her lips and then to mine when I reached her, as if to consecrate the quiet. Benji said, "Whoa," like a scientist encountering a new element, and then, "It's like ink in the air." Ruth told me I had good knees, the kind of auntie compliment that placed me squarely in the human family. The jogger said, "Support hose for life," and bumped my shoulder. The girl sidled up and asked where to buy tights that didn't itch. Maya told her about flat seams and cotton gussets and the price range she didn't have to exceed. The mother watched all this and didn't leave. That felt like a win. There were stares, from a man who lived in the building with the typed signs, from a couple whose lawn was a geometry problem and whose dog wore an ascot. There was a muttered comment, "That's not appropriate," that I chose not to catch. There was a small boy who asked his father sincerely if he could wear stars on his legs like the night, and the father said, "Maybe for Halloween." And the boy said, "Why do we have to wait for pretend?" And when nobody answered, he darted to the table anyway and found a temporary tattoo and pressed it to his shin with a popsicle stick. After the cleanup, the air smelled like leaves and dish soap and grill smoke. Maya and I stood at the edge of the lawn where the grass turned back into sidewalk, that seam between private and public that runs through everything. She slid her hand into mine. The nylon against her skin felt like a secret handshake between my body and the world. Then she lifted our joined hands, and placed them flat against her chest, just for a second, so I felt the drum of her heart through cotton and skin and the careful ache of how alive we were. On our way home, someone yelled out a car window, a handful of syllables that tried to be sharp and landed dull, a sound that tossed itself at us like a beer can. We didn't stop. We didn't turn ourselves into a lecture. She squeezed my hand once, hard. "Right pace," she said. "Keep it." Spring turned into the kind of warm that makes you forget sweaters exist. Benji learned how to whistle. The boutique held a sidewalk event, and Maya's manager asked if I'd help fit hosiery for customers who were nervous. I stood with a bin of sizes and shades and said to strangers, "Try this one. It won't fight you." And when a woman asked if her legs were too much for sheer, I said, "You have great legs," because it was true. And we all have a right to hearing the truth about our bodies without strings attached. Maya watched me and looked like she'd swallowed the sun. One night after the sidewalk event, we walked to the river with ice creams dripping onto our wrists, and she said, "I'm attracted to so many parts of you, Alex. Your kindness with my kid, the way you fold dish towels like you're making origami, the way you let sentences have their whole length. But I want to say out loud, because it matters, I'm also attracted to the way you love pantyhose, not as a kink to gawk at, not as a novelty item, as a choice of beauty that you claim." I felt the words go through me and lodge where I had formerly stored caution. I had expected to explain myself forever. I had not expected someone to reflect me back with grace and desire and the absence of alarm. "Thank you," I said. Simple because anything else would have been excessive in the face of this abundance. "I love that you see that. I love that you—" I couldn't finish without sounding like an epiphany. I decided to sound like an epiphany. "I love you," I said. "Good," she said, like she had on the porch that first day. She kissed me there by the river, my knees wanting to bend and the world bending instead. We didn't get married. Not that spring, not that year. We built something else that felt as sacred as vows, a calendar that Tetrised our lives with kindness, a wall hook for a canvas tote labeled with a Sharpie, stoop outfits, a drawer at her place that matched the drawer at mine. In it, I kept sheer black, graphite gloss, a matte in the color of my skin, so that sometimes the point wasn't visibility at all, but the way my muscles held differently, with even pressure. Sometimes we dressed up on Thursdays for no reason, she in a wrap dress with a slit and opaque tights, me in a shirt and the skater skirt and the gentle hush of nylon. Sometimes we didn't dress up and still ate dessert first. By the end of summer, the sycamore had new bark and the sidewalk remembered the shape of my feet. I kept walking every Sunday, past the river, back to the porch where someone kept a sewing kit and a little bottle of clear nail polish and the kind of hospitality that repairs. I still laddered pears. I learned to stop treating every snag as proof of wrongness. I learned to carry polish in my pocket, to be my own triage, to say to Maya on the kind of day that throws grit at you, "I want to feel guided and held," and she would say, "Then let's make that true," and hand me graphite gloss and a sweater soft as memory. When people asked, as they increasingly did, if I'd always been this way, if this way meant the skirt, the hosiery, the way my voice found room around the word man without closing other doors, I said, always, but not always this brave. I told them about the ladder, about the porch, about the universe that expands not in an explosion, but in a constant quiet drift outward, making more room at the edges for what we hadn't yet admitted we needed. On the first Sunday of the next fall, I woke to the smell of coffee and the cat's ballet and Maya's hair on my pillow, and I reached for the drawer. I picked graphite gloss. I rolled them up carefully, toes first, heel aligned. I stood, and the morning put the finish on me like blessing. Then I went to the river and let the light do its ridiculous beauty. Then I went to the porch, where we'd stitched something that holds, and I kept walking.